Recording in progress.
So once again, welcome to this first presentation after Easter 2021. It is my exceptionally great honor to welcome Jesse Mugambi to this presentation, which I don't think I need to say all too many words about Professor Mugambi, who's very well known. Who's, of course, also, he asked me to point out, perhaps I should say this, that the presentation itself is in a way related to the University of London, since because the University of East Africa, if you study the history of the institutions, was once known as University College, Nairobi University College, and the roots go back to the University of London. So this is, in a way, a cooperative process, which we can where we can see the fruits right unto the present day. Those of you who are at home in the history of Africa, and I'm not looking at Paul Gifford particularly, but I should say that this is not my area of particular expertise, but I have an interest, and this in a way was fomented by Lamine Sane, who acted as a mentor in the early stages of my PhD, which dealt with China, but actually it's the process of inculturation which interested me. And here I think the parallels are very clear. And of course, those of you who know the history of Christianity as a Near Eastern, an Eastern Mediterranean faith, you will know that in its inculturation over the centuries, it has changed dramatically from the earliest manifestations as an offshoot of Judaism, more or less. So we have in this continuing history of Christianity a number of aspects which I'm extremely glad Professor Mugambi will be mentioning today. I should be quiet at this point and actually hand over the microphone to our esteemed guest. Those of you who have not yet done so, could you please mute your own microphones? This session is being recorded, first on Zoom, and then finally we'll upload it onto the YouTube channel of SOAS. And I'm going to send you the link for this in due course. And as with all the seminars, the audiences that we reach are genuinely universal. They go into every corner of the globe. Also because some of our members cannot be here because they're in Eastern Asia or in America, and they always listen to the recordings. So thank you very much for to Professor Jesse Mugambi for being with us today. And I would like to ask you to begin with with your presentation. I'm going to upload the PowerPoint presentation as you speak. And at some point, you can direct me, you can say when I should be moving on to the next slide. So thank you very much. And my word to Professor Mugambi.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Lahman, for inviting me. It's a very, very happy moment for me because I've just retired only 2 months ago from the University of Nairobi. And my retirement coincides also with the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the University of Nairobi. It was started in 1970-71, the same year that I joined the university as an undergraduate, mature undergraduate. Yes, I wrote to you to say that the SOAS and the University of London is very closely associated with the University of Nairobi, because it used to be the University College of the University of East Africa, which was parented by the University of London. And we got our charter as a national university in 1970. So having this lecture in this academic year, when we are celebrating 50 years, it becomes a part of our celebrations. I alerted the Dean of the Faculty about this event, and I'm very happy that he has been able to log in. And if Professor Home is listening, I would like to beg that he says a few words to participate. Professor Home, are you listening? Are you logged on?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Wahome. This is a very great moment for us. Professor Wahome, please.
Yeah, I just want to thank the organizers of this particular meeting, because it's a special occasion as we celebrate our 50 years. And we are also proud that one of our luminaries, Professor Mugambi, who is with us as an emeritus professor, has taken this university this far, or has been part of the process of taking this university to where we are. And therefore, I'm proud of this process. I also know that he has played a big role nationally as a fellow of the Kenya National Academy of Sciences, and also as a holder of the Elder of Burning Spear, which are honors that he has gained through the University of Nairobi. Mine is just to say that the link between us is great, given that probably without SOAS and the University of London, we would not be where we are. And therefore, this is a great moment to see the 50 years coinciding with such an important meeting, which I think is very sensitive to the issues that we are facing today, all of us, and globally. Issues of pandemics, but the region has its own place, and I'm very happy that Professor Mugambi found time through you to give us this very important lecture. So I'm very happy, and on behalf of the university, I just express our gratitude for the organization of this particular meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Back to Professor Mugambi.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Wahome, on behalf of our faculty, including our department and the College of Humanities and Social Sciences. This is a great moment for us who happen to be in this ceremony. Now, I would like to make my presentation in two parts. One of them is in narrative, and I've sent it to Dr. Lahman. And if it's possible, I would like to spend a few minutes on that and then move to the slides, if you can, please. Yes, let me see, I hope I sent the right one. If I can manipulate it.
Is it this one or is it the other one? There were two.
You see, yeah, one, yeah. Broad, can you see it? Is it labeled broad screen? The title?
One moment. This is...
Is the title of it broad screen? Is that the title? Yes,
no, it says Global Pandemics and Human Responses.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the other one? Maybe one moment.
No, this is the wrong one. Let me give you the right one.
Okay, one second. Let
me give you the right one.
Okay. It's fine. There's no such thing as a wrong topic. It's just the timing that is important.
So this is the right one. How do I share screen? Let me see. I'm a novice in this.
I can let you share the screen.
Yes. So I'm looking for the button to share the Green.
Yes. Can you see the green button?
I'm looking for it.
I just enabled it for you, but.
Or should I? Let me send it to you. It will be easy.
If you can't see the green button with the share screen, because that is actually.
I should see it, but I'm not. Let me just.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. If you can see it, then you click onto it. Yes, there we go.
All right.
Then you just need the right folder. Exactly.
So now, where is my where is my screen now? Okay, let me see. I'm looking now for the file.
Yes.
Yeah.
We can see your computer, but
there we are. Yes. Can you see it now?
We can see the invitation or the title. Yes. Theology, theme, theology, and culture in biblical hermeneutics.
Yes.
Oh, there we are. Yes, exactly.
Okay. Let me. I'll tell you I'm laughing. In 1984-85, I did a course in communication policy and planning. And I didn't know that it would take me this far. Otherwise, the people of my age will not be able to press these buttons the way we are. So anyway, we can now get going. This map is from the internet, and is the map of COVID-19 and how the infections are faring continent after continent. You will notice that only a few countries, 2 in Africa, 1 in Asia, and Greenland, that do not seem to be reporting, or for some reason the statistics are not there. The darker the color, the greater are the numbers of infections. The point for showing this map is that when we talk about global pandemics, this is the first time, as far as recorded history is concerned, that we have had an epidemic that spread not only across countries, but also across continents to cover the entire world. So we are all novices in this venture, in this struggle. This is my first webinar to address at the Center of World Christianity, London, while based at the University of Nairobi, Kenya, which is hosted by the Center of World Christianity at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London. I would like to begin by thanking Dr. Lars Harman for inviting, I spelled your name with an L, first name instead of H, for inviting me to participate in this series of webinars. The University of London is the parent institution of the University of East Africa, in which the University College Nairobi was a part until the grant of charter by the University of Nairobi, as the University of Nairobi in 1970. Thus, the year 2020-21 academic year is the 50th since the University of Nairobi was chartered. This webinar is a commemorative event between the University of London and the University of Nairobi. It is a joy for me to be part of this commemoration. During this half century, the University of Nairobi has been my academic home, and it's a joy for me to participate in this commemoration. My hope and prayer is that during the next half century, there will be close collaboration between the Center of World Christianity, the University of London, and the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies, to which I belong. The year 2019 is the first time in recorded history that the whole world is simultaneously engulfed in a pandemic with a code name COVID-19. This pandemic can provide some instructive insights about the role of religion in a culture, and also of individuals, families, groups, and communities. Discernment of such insights is the aim of this online seminar. You're welcome to take your own notes as you prepare for this seminar. It is impossible to survive a pandemic in isolation. The pandemic labeled as COVID-19 is the most devastating in recorded history. My focus in this webinar is to comment briefly on two tracks of documentation, one from the Bible and the other from secular sources. Both these sources can be accessed online. The challenge for us is to discern insights that may help while constructively responding to the challenges of this global pandemic. Religious narratives and artifacts are mainly, but not exclusively, for expressing appreciation of divine interventions in history. The 10 plagues in the book of Exodus are presented as miracles for convincing the king, the Pharaoh, to set free an enslaved community. Severity increases from one plague to the next until the king, the Pharaoh, yields. All the 10 plagues are water-related, having occurred along the River Nile, incidentally, part of Africa. I interject here before I continue. We hear from the West the label used as Sub-Sahara Africa, which is an insult and an incorrect one, because there is no Africa without North Africa. The reason being that the continent of Africa derives its name from the province that Julius Caesar established in 146 BC, Africa Proconsularis. So we cannot have Africa without North Africa. And so to define a continent by a subset of it, a desert, is to say the least and the worst. It's an insult. In retrospect, it is understandable that all plagues had to do with insects, frogs, livestock, and people. All of them near the banks of the Nile River, which begins from not far from my own home. In the end, Pharaoh complied, and the people were set free. On the internet, there are 20 pandemics listed since about 3000 before the Common Era, about 5,000 years ago. This dating coincides with the oldest cemetery just excavated near Lake Turkana in our country, in northern Kenya, preserved by the Kenya National Museum. They say that that cemetery is 5,000 years old, which means it was around 3000 BC. And the list of pandemics which can now be accessed online also date up to 3000 BC, which means 5,000 years ago. I do not know, I'm not an archaeologist. Could it be that that cemetery contains some of those who died of the oldest pandemic that is recorded? Professor Home is listening, he's a historian. That is homework for us. The remains are dated as 5,000 years old, and this is a coincidence that about 5,000 years ago is also a year that seems to coincide with the documentation about the pandemics that we read about in the Bible. The remains are dated 5,000 years old, and is a coincidence. Now, if I could continue beyond this point, could it be that the cemetery in northern Kenya contains remains of people that succumbed to the pandemic on the academic archaeologists list? We don't know. Maybe, maybe not, but the years coincide. Even if the answer were negative, this archaeological site in northern Kenya is a reminder that humans for millennia have been pondering over the puzzling questions about ultimate origin, ultimate purpose, and ultimate destiny. That's what cemeteries are about. All humans, as communities, have ways and means through which they address themselves to these questions. Religiosity, broadly defined, is preoccupied with these three puzzles: ultimate origin, ultimate purpose, and ultimate destiny. It is worthwhile to begin with some conceptual clarifications. Copernicus, a contemporary of Martin Luther, was the first person to suggest that the earth revolves around the sun. Martin Luther skeptically dismissed Copernicus as an abstract astrologer and reasserted that the earth was flat. Looking back 500 years, our knowledge about the universe has greatly advanced, but there is still much, much more for us to learn about our home, planet Earth. Now I come to the second part of the text before we go to the slides. Global pandemics as concerns in theology and culture. Plagues are contagious and fatal if not diagnosed and treated very early. Thus, a plague is best managed with preventive rather than creative procedures. In the Bible, the word plague has broad meaning, referring to interferences in nature that cause massive deaths, making the infected and the affected members of society dysfunctional or even die. Biblical texts on the 10 plagues are an integral part of a long narrative on the struggles of the Israelites to leave Egypt, where they had been held in bondage for generations. Biblical narratives are in various categories, and only a few have historical accuracy. The main purpose, however, is to convey the impact of divine intervention in history, with particular reference to the community of believers involved. The most important message running through the Bible is that God, the Creator, is in charge of human destiny. Punishment befalls those who defy divine commands, and blessing is the fate, the happy fate of those who comply. Religion has a very broad frame of reference, both in singular and in plural. Religion is a collective noun, in the sense that it refers to what a community believes in obedience to supernatural authority. Although there are many founders of many religions, there is no religion with one person as the only member. I can pause here for a while and make a joke about our own experience. Kenya is one of the countries with the largest number of religions and the largest number of denominations. And there's one that I remember, and Professor Home will remember, who decided to start his own religion, and he went to a roundabout where there was a tree, and he would be there with his megaphone, and he was there for a very long time, and he didn't have any followers. He's dead now, but in Kenya you can have an even one-man religion, but by definition it doesn't really become a religion until you have a few people around you. Although there are founders of religions, there is no religion with one person as the only member, as the one that I am talking about. He did not form a religion because he was only alone. He probably could have two or three, but one person does not make one religion. Founders of religions are pioneers who gain wide following, often in protest or criticism of contemporary religiosity. This leads me to a few illustrations. Every religion has a raison d'etre, a reasoning way, a metaphysical outlook, a lens through which to interpret the signs of the times, a justification for existence. Some cultures attribute all metaphysical processes to one deity or to many. Others are non-theistic, but still metaphysical. Throughout history, there has been temptation for one culture to despise or denigrate others. This temptation is typical of humans, and perhaps other primates also, denigrating other creatures or denigrating others within the same species. Living things compete for goodies that make life comfortable. Humans are the most competitive and at the same time, the most aggressive and most destructive, self-destructive. This is a paradoxical puzzle. Paradoxical because we are supposed to have a great deal of intelligence, but we don't seem to use it that intelligently. It would be reasonable to suppose that the most intelligent species are the least destructive. The reality, however, is that humans, although the most intelligent, are paradoxically the most self-destructive. Religion is implicated in this mentality of self-annihilation. Professor Jared Diamond is a professor of population geography at the University of California. We have never met in person, but I very much resonate with his thinking. And in case you haven't read some of his books, I would recommend two of them. How Societies Choose to Fail or Succeed is the 2005 book. And another one, which is earlier than that, Guns, Gems, and Steel, The Fates of Human Societies. And I would recommend those. They're available online. You don't even have to buy because they're available in text, and they're very relevant to what we are discussing this afternoon. The core teachings of all religions try to navigate through this paradox, but some of them are fully comprehensive. Religions, by definition, try to make sense about the incomprehensible, but comprehensiveness would make religion irrelevant or superfluous. If we got all the answers, then there will be no necessity for religion. The whole point about religion is that there remain doubts and questions that we cannot solve ourselves with our reason. The year 2020 is unique. Began with news about COVID-19 pandemic, simultaneously affecting all nations, all cultures, and all members, segments of society, men and women, old and young, religion and secular, rural and urban, rich and poor, high and lowly, learned and learned. Everyone is affected. Statistics have been broadcast real time, showing the spread and magnitude of COVID-19 pandemic, as I have shown on the map, and these statistics continue being updated. What do we make of it as scholars? What does religion make of it? On the basis of responses reported in the news media and on the internet, it's apparent that the answers to ultimate puzzles remain mystery, with neither science nor technology to unravel with precision and finality. Advances in the various branches of science and technology have not yet solved the challenge of human vulnerability. Religion is at its best when this ultimate vulnerability is taken for granted, when humans admit or confess that in spite of all the intelligence all the knowledge and all technical capability, humans remain ultimately dependent on power and authority that is much greater than all accomplishments in science, technology, philosophy, and theology. The 10 plagues of Egypt during the 5th century BC. The biblical reference to the 10 plagues of Egypt is a useful starting point for discussion of global pandemics that we face today. The meaning attached to the word plague in the Bible is different from its ordinary usage in the English language today. According to medical dictionaries, the word plague refers to a contagious bacterial disease characterized by fever and delirium, typically with formation of buboes, such as the bubonic plague, and sometimes with infection of the lungs, pneumatic plague. Bubonic plague causes a bubble, a swelling, as a result of swollen lymph nodes in the armpit and the groin, whereas pneumatic plague inflames the lungs, interfering with breathing. In the Bible, we have these 10 plagues, and we need not go into too much of details because we know about them in Exodus 7 to 12. The interesting thing is that when you look at all of them, except perhaps the last two, they have to do with water. And if one were to go to the details to see what was happening when these events occurred, calling them plagues, they probably had to do with flooding from the Nile, from waters that not are very far from our part of the world, because the Nile actually begins from East Africa. And if there was red water, there must have been a lot of flooding in East Africa, which took all the mud to the place. But religiously, you see, those people were not talking about science. They were talking about God's intervention in history. And from there, you have frogs, then you have lice of gnats, then you have pestilence of swarms, pestilence of livestock being infested, and then there were boils, then there was thunderstorm of hail and fire, then there were locusts, there was darkness for 3 days, there was death of the firstborn. All these except the last three have actually to do with water. They have to do with ecology. In the end, with the death of the firstborns, the king yields and the people are set free. But before we go to the next point, just to observe that the interaction between humans and nature is such that when we interfere with nature, we pay very dearly for it. One of my concerns has to do with ecology, where we have so much interfered with nature that we are paying very, very dearly for it. And in my teaching, I've been suggesting to my students, out of personal experience, that if you work alongside nature, if you don't try to fight nature, you get a blessing. You try to fight with nature, you pay very dearly for it. But now I want to move to the global pandemics of today. This information is on the internet. And I was surprised when I was preparing for this lecture. There are 20 of them over recorded history. And I've started the list from the most recent, which is going on. The Zika virus epidemic, which was identified in 2015, the two crosses indicate that it is still continuing. It has not yet subsided. Number two, the West African Ebola epidemic, identified in 2014 and was brought under control in 2016. The H1N1 swine flu pandemic, which devastated us in 2009 and 2010. The fourth one, HIV/AIDS, identified in 1981, and it has not been suppressed as yet. It's still with us, and it's still devastating society and individuals. 5, the Asian flu that lasted between 1957 and 1958. The Spanish flu, which was identified in 1918 and continued until 1920. 7, the American polio pandemic of 1916. 8, the flu pandemic of 1889 to 1890. 9, the Philadelphia yellow fever epidemic of 1793. 10, the Russian plague of 1770 to 1772. 11, the Great Plague of Marseille, 1720 to 1723. 12, the Great Plague of London, 1665-1666. 13, the American plagues of the 16th century. 14, the Colitli epidemic of 1545 to 1548. And number 15, the Black Death of 1346 to 1353. We're still going back in time. The plague of Justinian of 541 to 542 of the Common Era. 17, the plague of Cyprian of 250 to 271 of the Common Era. 18, the Antonine plague of 165 to 180 of the Common Era. Then the plague of Athens of 430 before Common Era. And then, interestingly, the prehistoric pandemic of around 3000 BCE. All this information is on the internet. And when I was researching it, I got puzzled because the cemetery found in northern Kenya is 5,000 years old. Maybe the theologians and the archaeologists will need to get going to find out whether those people in those graves died of the prehistoric epidemic that they list in their architecture. This is the photograph is available online of the graveyard in northern Kenya, and it is around the same place where they found the most complete skeleton of Homo sapiens, of Homo erectus. And so it could well be that maybe when we learn to be human, we were not very far from this country that now is called Kenya. The oldest monumental architecture in Eastern Africa is about of this this graveyard, and maybe perhaps we may want to find out more about it and what it means. This is the first part of my presentation. The other one is on the slides, and that will not take us very far, so I suggest that we go to the slides. Thank you. I hope I can enlarge my screen. Here we are. So there are a few slides, there are not many, and I'll rush through them. Global pandemics and human responses. I start this slide with a quotation. And this quotation is the first sentence of John Beatty's book, African Religions and Philosophy. Africans are notoriously religious, and each people has its own religious system with a set of beliefs and practices. This is the opening sentence of Professor John Beatty's book titled African Religions and Philosophy, published by Heinemann in 1969. Beatty jokingly intended to emphasize that Africans are incurably religious, and if I had been editing his manuscript, I would not have said notorious, I would have said incurable. But he passed on not long ago, and every time I said I was going to raise the issue with John Beatty, we got talking about all other things except this one, so we never resolved it before he passed on. Beatty jokingly intended to emphasize that Africans are incurably religious, if religiosity were to be regarded as a sickness. In societies where secularism is normative, religion is negatively profiled. But in Africa, religion is taken for granted, but variably conceptualized and expressed. The religiousness among Africans was not injected into African consciousness by missionaries, whether Christian or Muslim. Africans never engaged in conflict over religion. That would be taboo. That would be unacceptable. The competition over African souls within and across religions and ideologies is alien and un-African. There are many necessities to preoccupy us, especially this time when ideologies pollute religious consciousness. One of the sayings in one of the African languages is that nobody teaches a child about God. A child grows up in wisdom and in truth, if obedient, observant, and compliant. What is all this about? In my view, it has to do with ultimate origin. In Old English, one would ask, where has it all begun? When it has a sense of distance and space in the past. When has it all begun in terms of place and space? And the second one is why? Why? Ultimate purpose. And why are we here? Why are we even in this session? Why are we here? Why should we discuss it? What has brought it all? It's a very difficult question to answer. It's a religious one. Ultimate destiny. Whither, an old word, English word, whither, it combines distance and time in the future. Whither is it all leading? These are the three ultimate questions that religion is about. Science will not answer it. Economy will not answer it. Policy will not answer it. These are very fundamental questions. The universe is preceded. The universe has preceded us because we would have had nowhere to be, but it also outlives us. This is the paradox. We found it here and we leave it here. Even when we are fighting over land and minerals and I don't know what, we found them here, we leave them here. The universe outlives us. We should not behave as if it is ours. We belong to it for us to bequeath to future generations. It does not belong to us, it belongs to future generations who are also entitled to it, also to bequeath to others. The ultimate destiny is beyond us. The best we can do is anticipate the fruits of our striving beyond our lifetime. Under influence of modernity, we humans suffer the temptation of preoccupation with the immediate at the expense of the ultimate. Humans take life for granted as long as everything seems to go on normally, as they have anticipated. When regularity is disrupted, humans recall previous experiences in quest for answers. Sometimes previous experience provides some insights, but sometimes there are no precedents. Pandemics are widespread illnesses that infect populations and spread uncontrollably. COVID-19 is one such pandemic. the most devastating, the most widespread, and the most complex. 132 million cases, more than that, nearly 3 million deaths, nearly 106 million recoveries. People in all nations have been affected, some much more than others. So I get back to this photograph again, just to ask the question, could it be that even without any other evidence, that perhaps there was a pandemic which also affected us? Could it be that those 5,000 years that have been recorded of the skulls that have been found, skeletons that have been found, or because of a pandemic? Well, it's only a guess. I'm not an archaeologist, but it's something to ponder. Religion is more than Christianity, more than Islam, more than Judaism, more than Hinduism, more than all those religions that we number. If I can put it differently, all of them are approximations, all of them are attempts to gain meaning out of on a very difficult question, the question of ultimate concern, out of ultimate purpose, ultimate destiny. I would not like to go into too much of these details because we need to discuss, but maybe I should go through this slide and then I could open it for us to discuss. Christianity, Buddhism, and Islam are multi-denominational, but they are not normative among humans. They are a minority in contrast with older traditions as those in Africa and Asia. Islam and Christianity are latecomers. Christianity has more than 40,000 denominations and countless sects. In Kenya, we do not know how many denominations and sects we have. We have lost count, including one-man denominations. Here you can take a drum and start anywhere, and nobody will prevent you because you're free, if you think that will answer your ultimate questions. Hinduism and Buddhism are more meditational than prayerful, but they try to search for that answers to ultimate questions with techniques to discipline the mind. Apparently, scriptures are a problem, not a solution for religiosity. Africa is overwhelmed with foreign religions. Africa has Africanized the religions they have received, and they're still doing so. African critiques of Christianity and Islam are not unique. We see the debates and conflicts over religions all over. So when Africans quest is not unique, that's what has been happening all along in history. This slide, I try to think about the word traditional when it is put before the word religion. And it occurred to me that there are no people without traditional religions. And very often what happens is that when a new religion comes, then it is appended to our traditional religiosity. That's what happened with Christianity, to the extent that even as we celebrate Easter, the rituals and seasons of Christianity are actually copied from Nordic mythology and Nordic ritual. So this always happens with humans, that when we get new ideas, we append them to what we already believe. And then if we're not careful, we start fighting. This we have already gone through. It's what we covered about the 10 plagues, and that's the 20 plagues that we talked about. And this one, this slide is just to say to us that in all our endeavors, in all our ritual, in all our myth, in all our emotional expressions, in all our social institutions, in all our ethical, moral, legal institutions, in all our doctrines, we are attempting to make sense of what is befalling us, what has befallen us, and trying to answer what will come of us. And that's what religiosity is all about. And when we relate this to pandemics, it does seem to me, and I wish to be corrected if I'm mistaken, we are being reminded once again, especially in COVID-19, we are being reminded again that we are really not as strong as we thought we were. We are not as smart as we thought we were. We are not as powerful as we thought we were. We are not as technically savvy as we thought we were. How come, if we were so powerful, how come that it's just a molecule? It's not even an organism, it's a molecule that we cannot see with the naked eye, and it's bothering so much. What has happened to our power? What has happened to our intelligence? This is the challenge that we face, and is not applicable to any particular nation, to any particular race, to any particular specialization. It applies to all of us. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jesse Mugambi. I'm overwhelmed because this is, of course, as a pandemic, it is something that affects our lives at every moment. I should add that one of the problems with the webinar today was to get into my office here at SOAS, because it's completely closed, and normally you have to book in advance, but there was a problem with the booking mechanism. So it was, I had to make use of my charm in order to make sure that I could actually get into the office on time. It's something which you say it is a humbling experience, and this is very true, because I grew up at the time when being mobile, being hypermobile was one of the features of human success. So in other words, could you be at two conferences, one in Shanghai and one in Singapore within 24 hours of each other? Yes, of course. If you use the the benefits of the jet set age, then you could do that. But now you can't even get from one part of a district to the other without facing questions and services being restricted, access being denied. This is the only thing that I learned alongside all of you is how to use contraptions such as Zoom, which a year ago I had never heard of. So this is certainly a very humbling experience. Also, it affects the most basic human needs, touching on religion. So my uncle just died these days just before Easter, and I am negotiating with undertakers, with priests, about the simplest things that we have always had, such as a funeral. Suddenly they become so complicated. And so talking about religion, and what you said about religion, that this is something where you are usually more than one person who believes in something, so you have communities. COVID has made this a very complicated affair. So, so thank you very much for these extremely insightful ideas. And I have several points that I wanted to raise, but I think I should allow all of us to participate in the discussion now. So please unmute yourselves when you want to talk. I don't think we're as many as, yes, you can raise your hands if you like, but yes, Deborah, why not? Let's start with you.
Hello, welcome, Jesse. I think I met you in Pretoria 20 years ago at a conference organized by Dana Robert in the days of jet planes and international travel. I just wondered if you could update us a little on what the reaction in Kenya has been from the churches, perhaps. Are people pondering the sort of theology of pandemics, or has it been a question for the churches more of responding to need on a practical level? I mean, I don't even know, you know, I'm a South African originally, so I'm keeping pace a little bit with what's happening with the pandemic in South Africa, but I don't even know really how it has been for Kenya. So I just wondered about a sort of rather contemporary concern. How has the church been reacting in Kenya itself?
Yes, yes, I can respond. For Kenya, the COVID-19 is a national emergency, and we are operating as a republic on emergency rules. That means that we are under curfew, and when it was declared, I remembered my childhood, because 10 years of my life were wasted under curfew, but it was not because of a pandemic. It was because of a fight for our national freedom. But now we are under curfew because of an invisible molecule. Yeah, so here it's taken very seriously. In fact, now we have to be indoors before sunset, and we can only come out after sunset because it's a national emergency. That's one side of it. The other side of it is how then do we worship? And Kenya is a very openly and ritually religious society. And for the first time, we have begun to appreciate the importance of the new technology. Most of the religions are now worshiping online. And it has been so perfected. And very fortunately, again, and this is known worldwide, Kenya is one of the countries with the largest number of mobile phones. And the coverage is practically 100% now. So Kenyans have become very innovative to the point where even prayers, even within the same family, don't have to go to the church anymore, that people can actually pray for each other wherever they are. And this is one of the most creative moments in the history of Kenya. So there's a sense in which on one side, it has been devastating, but there's another sense in which looking forward, Kenya will never be the same again. In as far as our science and technology is concerned, Kenya has already accepted the vaccination, and the drugs have been procured. It's going to take a while before everybody can be immunized, but the government is committed into it. Thinking about religiosity, prayer, I can confirm that what I've been saying here is not just academic or theoretical. And what the pandemic has done is to remind Kenyans once again, from the richest to the poorest, from the most powerful to the least powerful, we have learned that there is no reason for boasting because we are all very vulnerable. So we have been all leveled to size by the pandemic.
Thank you very much, and Deborah as well for your question. Are there any other questions? Jackson Adama. Oh no, Joe Davis. There we go. Yes. If you could please unmute yourself.
Ready? I'm apologizing for the sound of drilling, which you may be able to hear. There's a problem next door and they're driving us crazy. Thank you so much for this very interesting paper, Professor Mugambi. My question is around the burial site, the 5,000-year-old burial site that you showed us the picture of. I'm just wondering if, is it a national heritage, and would you be able to say anything more about, any knowledge that you have about that site, and why do you think that it could have been from a pandemic? Although I know you say you're not an archaeologist, I accept, but what makes you think that the site could be indicative of a pandemic or a national ill?
Yes, well, thank you for asking the question. The number of graves they've identified there is not just 1 or 2 or 3, there are 600. And those are the ones they've been able to discover, to find. I would like to refer all of you, especially you who have asked the question, to the July 1992 issue of the National Geographic. The people involved in research about population migrations, and I have not heard any refutation of it. It seems as if we learned to be human from simpler forms of animals somewhere not far from where we are, moving northwards. And so the oldest, the continent with the oldest species of humans is Africa. And the movement seems to have been northwards from not far from where we are, along the Nile Valley, and the crossing was at the Isthmus of Suez, which is the only spot on this planet Earth where 3 continents meet. And one wing went northwestwards all the way to Norway and Sweden and Denmark, and the other wing westwards. And eventually the latest arrivals of humans on this planet are in Argentina, only 13,000 years ago. So the question you have asked is a very pertinent one. If these are 5,000 years old and they were already Homo erectus, where had they come from and where were they going and what were they doing there? You are scratching your head. But that is for the future, but we're beginning to get clues. But what are the religious implications or implications of this? I leave you with an ethical issue. In Africa, one of the worst crimes you can commit is to insult your ancestors. So let us respect our ancestors who happen to be African.
Thank you for this very diplomatic answer. It's yes. Is there
can I ask a question?
Yes, please go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, so Jackson Adama, I'm originally from Ghana, but here at Duke University in Durham, United States. Thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Professor Mugambi. I really appreciate your work and from afar. And so could you please shed light on how African Pentecostals are responding to the pandemic? Like, And by this time, I have in mind the rise of Pentecostalism is well documented, that Pentecostals have a very dualistic framework where you have good spirits, evil spirits, or like the world is divided into sharp dichotomies where you have the spiritual world and the physical, and the spiritual world actually has a big impact on what we see. And so in a sense, how is this orientation influencing how Pentecostals are responding, African Pentecostals are responding to the pandemic? And also in your presentation, you mentioned you actually looked at the scriptural, the 10 plagues, and also some of the list of the pandemics in history that you gave. Some of them were called plagues and also some pandemics. Would you say that these names in a way in the African imagination orient us in different directions? So for instance, when we speak about plague, because of the scriptural imagination that we have, we naturally think, well, this is something that we can only resolve based on certain practices that align us with God's will, so that the plague will end. But when we call it a pandemic, does it orient us in a more scientific direction, because we are now living in a world, in a secular world? So I would love to hear your thoughts on that. Yeah.
Thank you very much. You've been very candid the way you have asked the question, and also be very candid in the way I answer it. I answered from Kenyan perspective. I won't talk about other countries. The pandemic in Kenya is not a religious matter. It is a matter of national emergency. And so the regulations about social distance are not options.
Mm.
And you are going to be arrested if you don't wear a mask. And you're going to be arrested if you don't keep the curfew. And you're going to be arrested if you are in crowds, whether it is even for a funeral, even for a wedding. Those rules have to be observed. So, in as far as the pandemic is concerned, the C-19 is concerned, it doesn't matter what you hold according to your beliefs. There are certain things that you must do, and if you violate them, you are going to face the full force of the law. And if not, then you're going to end up in the mortuary. And there are even regulations now about burial, how it is going to be done, and weddings. They're very strict. The government is very strict about it because it's not a laughing matter. And I think asking me to reflect about it, we, I think, are being taught by this molecule about the things we took for granted. And one of the most important is how small and how powerless we actually are. And what the pandemic, C-19, is teaching us is that the more powerful you thought you were, actually the more powerless you are.
Mm.
And this is being now appreciated and is sinking in among all of us, that we should not brag about how intelligent, how scientific, how technological we are. It's not because of it. It's all very vulnerable. And I think the reality is that even among the Pentecostal charismatic churches, they are coming to appreciate that now. Burial, marriage, those are rites of passage, are now have to be conducted under the strict regulations on advice of the technical experts, reinforced by law. And this is the only way we can keep the infections down.
Mm. Thank you very much.
You and now Dr. Wahume, please.
Thank you. I am looking at religiosity and the pandemic, and I'm looking at the case of Tanzania, where religion supersedes, during the time of Magufuli, that religion was more important in dealing with this particular issue than the aspects of medicine. How would Professor Mugambi look at this from a religion point of view?
Yeah, Professor Ahome, thank you for the question. As soon as the regulations were instructed, I started monitoring the infections. And unless it has changed now with the change of leadership in Tanzania, when the counting reached 508 infections, the counting stopped. And it never changed. I don't know whether it has changed now, but throughout the leadership of the lead president, the number recorded was only 508. That's where they stopped counting. That does not mean that there were no deaths in Tanzania, as they are now recognizing, because now Tanzania is picking up from where Kenya has, because there is no option in stopping the spread of infections unless we keep safe distance and observe all the other rules. Unfortunately, the president succumbed to COVID-19, and he was not able even to speak in the last days of his life to change his mind, because when this pandemic begins, it is so sudden that people don't even have time to apologize. But it is very important to respect science and technology, because God has empowered us with intelligence, not to play around with it, but to use it. The gray matter in our head is not just gray, it is for thinking. Thank you, Professor Ahome.
Thank you very much. We have time for another 2 or 3 questions, and then I will need to wrap up. Who would like to ask? Any questions from? I have a question to you. It is actually quite linked to the question before, when we talked about the charismatic element. Joe Davis, yes, Joe, in 1 second, please. To you as a Christian, how do you respond, both intellectually but also in terms of faith, to a situation where you're completely powerless, and not just you, but society around you, in fact, the whole world? When you wake up, what are your first thoughts when you're confronted with this overwhelming experience?
Thank you for the question. I have learned throughout my life not to take anything for granted. And that word grant is very interesting because it is not because we are powerful, it's not because we are intelligent, it's not because we are all those adjectives we can think about. It's just because God is gracious. There's power beyond us that allows us to be alive, to be able to do what we do, including what we are doing now. I mean, this what we are going through now in this webinar is amazing, and it's humbling that we can be able to meet the way we are instantaneously across continents. But we should not take this for granted. We should be grateful that it can happen. So for me, it has been very, very humbling. And this sense of humility is not specifically Christian. It's not specifically African. I think it is what distinguishes humans from the other primates and the primates from the other animals. The problem I see is that when we begin to imagine as if we are successful, as if we are powerful, then we forget that it's not really because of all that strength or that power. And that is when the deck of cards just crumbles. I think the COVID-19 is just reminding us about our vulnerability, but also about our potential. Because if we did it right, we'll learn even more about ourselves. This is my take of it. And the session we are having today, which is unique, I could not imagine that this will happen, is just an illustration that we can actually do a great deal. But when we achieve, we should not take it for granted. We should not think that it is because we are capable. The better way to look at it is that just because we are fortunate, and others could have done it better if circumstances were different. And that is why the University of London and the University of Nairobi are celebrating a relationship that would have been inconceivable when I came to the university, when I was enrolled in 1970. 50 years down the road, I can be able to celebrate with SOAS.
SOAS are very grateful for being alive after quite a turbulent year, but we are certainly very much, we want to have this conversation with, the scholars who we inspired, and that's of course very inspiring for us. We have two questions, one by Joe and one by Maripuane. Joe, maybe very quickly, and then Maripuane.
Lars, thank you. Mine is just to draw attention to the fact that Jackson Adama has a follow-up question in the chat.
Oh.
If you want to go to the second question first, then I have no questions of my own.
Okay, thank you, Jackson. So I'm going to read it out. A follow-up question, if there is time, okay, some more time. How are African Christians negotiating the tension between religious freedoms and the suspension of these freedoms under the state of emergency?
Yeah, thank you very much. What's happening in Kenya right now is that worship has not stopped, it has not ended. And even the evening prayers that used to have not stopped. What has happened now is that services, All Saints Cathedral, Holy Family Basilica, all of them are actually being done online. And national television stations have already opened up for this. So people are worshiping from home, but live following the services in their respective churches. As far as funerals are concerned, the numbers have been restricted. Funerals in Kenya and some other African countries would be as well attended as weddings. But there's now a restriction on the number that can attend the funerals. So Kenyans have accepted realistically to adapt themselves to these regulations. And they have been vindicated because those who have violated, unfortunately, have lost their lives. There are Pentecostals and charismatics who thought that this was a joke and they did not oblige. And unfortunately, we have lost many of them. They have already succumbed to COVID and they're not alive anymore. So I think even the state is being appreciated for the ensuring that these regulations are complied with in order not only to stabilize the infections, but also to reduce them until such time as the pandemic can be under control.
And then Maripuane, if you could please unmute yourself.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear.
Yes, thank you very much for the lecture. I think what I want to check with is something that you just raised towards the end about how some, should I say, clergy persons and, you know, a certain understanding, I guess, also of the Bible would lead to people going to the other extreme, if we may put it that way, and bring it to the South African context where there is, at the moment, there is a conflict between some religious leaders, and this would be mostly of Pentecostal and charismatic persuasion, and government, you know, in terms of how the church, they are arguing, and I think they are having a point, if you like, that the church, why is church, why are clergy people, why is Bible interpretation, why is something that has to do with spirituality, church in terms of the, you know, viewed through the Christian tradition, for example, but you can include other traditions. You know, we also have Islam, African traditional religion, and so forth, but they are foregrounding the issue of church. Why do pastors, or why are pastors, for example, not regarded as providing essential services, while amidst the COVID, you know, there's been a high rise of gender-based violence, there's been suicide and all that. So therefore they are saying, why do you, for example, when you go to malls, there are no restrictions, if you like. People must keep distance, but they are not keeping it anyway. But people are now restricted to go to church, while the religious leaders are saying, why disadvantage people for such a long time, more than a year, while you could allow them to open. You know, the cry is open up churches, but responsibly. You know, a church that carries, I mean, right now we are still under lockdown, but there is still a restriction that only 250, is it only, yeah, only 250 or only 200 for bigger churches, and then 500 for outdoors. But what about a church, for example, that carries 5,000? So that is still a challenge. So therefore, there are those who may even go to the extent of saying, no, we will now go against what the politicians are saying, because our leader is Jesus. So therefore, we will allow people to come, as long as we allow people to open, to have the church, come to church, but be responsible, make sure that all those protocols are followed. How would you respond to this one?
Well, I know who you are. That's my sister Madipone Masenya from South Africa. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
I
Prof.
can't see you, but I know you. Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think, let me give an illustration with regard to the church where I worship. It's a large cathedral that can hold 1,000 when there is no pandemic. The regulation has to do with how many, what distance, safe distance is kept. And if you're going to skip a pew and you skip another pew and you skip another pew and you skip 2 persons in between, then it does show that a cathedral that can hold 1,000 will probably be able to hold only about 300 or so. And this is what has happened, for instance, with regard to All Saints Cathedral and the Holy Family Basilica. Those who do not want to comply with those rules, they don't have to come. So the issue, as I would interpret it, is that if a congregation was holding, say, 100, because that was its size, because of these restrictions, it could not be able to hold those 100 in one session. But if they wanted to meet more times, then it would mean that you could actually hold several sessions in the same day, but keeping social distance. And unfortunately, those who have defied in order to make a point are no longer with us, because it's not just the state enforcing. It is what the infection requires. So for me, as I understand it, at least in this country, the enforcement of the law has not been the curfew I talked about in the 1950s that I grew up with. It's a curfew which has to do with our own survival. And there are localities where this defiance was implemented. And unfortunately, the death rate in some neighborhoods is extremely high. And once you know one is gone, one is gone. So what has happened in Kenya is that the enforcement this time has not been of the military and administrative kind. It has also been accompanied by a lot of education on television, on radio, so that people can actually understand that it's in their own interest that we do this if we are going to put this infection under control.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. So this was unfortunately the last question, because we have been asked repeatedly to limit the cloud volume on the Zoom cloud, I mean, because apparently SOAS we have reached the maximum already, and we have been criticized very badly for going over time. But half an hour extra is okay. That's they can keep me responsible for this if you want to. But once again, Jesse Mugambi, thank you so much for this very, very interesting and fascinating topic, and your thoughts on a genuinely global situation that we are now in. Thank you, and I shall include you in the future mailings for the Center for World Christianity, because this is your presence would be very much appreciated, and the presence of all of you who are perhaps here for the first time. So thank you very much, and once again, do look after yourselves now in these very dangerous times, and don't lose your faith in humanity and in God, and yes, and thank you very much for sharing your experience that you've accumulated in the last 50 years, you know, as affiliated to SOAS, to University of London in the wider sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye. Goodbye to all of you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye. Goodbye.
Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for participating. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, Anne-Marie. Bye, Paul as well. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Professor Mugambi.
Bye, Lars.
Yes, bye.
Appreciate very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
In touch online.
Yes. Yes, we will be on touch.